Passion, purpose, possibilities. They're all right there. But sometimes we need a little push. And that's where SheSez comes in. Think of it as a master class taught by the world's most interesting women, sharing stories and ideas because girlfriends help each other. This is SheSez with Linda Grasso. Hello and welcome to SheSez. Our guest today is someone who you could describe as a serial entrepreneur, Alexandra Wilkus Wilson. If you love fashion, chances are you spent some time on Gilt, the flash sale website that Alexandra co-founded in 2007. In 2014, Alexandra launched another successful startup, Glamsquad, an app to get hair and makeup professional services at home. But Alexandra loves a challenge, and in February, she made a major pivot from being her own boss to working at a large corporation. Alexandra is currently Senior VP of Consumer Strategy and Innovation for Allergan, the mega successful pharmaceutical company that makes Botox, among other products. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from New York.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, first question. What did your closet look like back in your Gilt days?
Well, I live in New York City, so in New York we are all starved for closet space, but I did enjoy many perks of my Gilt days. I was there for 7 years, and we got to work with some of the most exciting international brands. So I think I was probably one of the top shoppers, and maybe still am today on Gilt. So I would certainly enjoy a lot of the shopping on our site, and got to know so many designers over the years. So it was overflowing.
Overflowing, as I would imagine. I'd still like to see it today. I bet it's still pretty rocking. What was the light bulb moment for Gilt? Were you had a partner, Alexis. What is her last name?
Maybank, Alexis Maybank.
Alexis Maybank. Were you two sitting together, strategizing, thinking of your next move, trying to come up with an idea, or did it just boom?
So I think those stories you hear about light bulb moments and then everything just falls into place is probably not always how things actually work out. For us, I think it was a series of conversations and light bulb moments, and we had 5 co-founders at Gilt, so Alexis Maybank and I certainly, and then 2 engineers, Mike Brizik and Fong Nguyen, as well as Kevin Ryan, who had a track record of launching successful startups. So the 5 of us came together, each with unique perspectives and experiences, and also personalities. You know, that really was the catalyst for launching Gilt, which our first sale we ever did was November 2007. Zac Posen was the first brand that we ever sold.
How did you convince Zac Posen to come on board? That's not someone who you find on sale a lot either. I mean, occasionally you will at, Barney Saks or whatever, but super high-end merchandise.
So, great question. Actually, in our second year in business school, Alexis and I had done a field study project for Zac Posen. We worked with his mother, Susan. And when we had the idea for Gilt, she was the first person we reached out to, and we told her about our exciting idea. And she, of course, poked holes in it and was skeptical about some things, but she understood what we were trying to build and our vision. And she said, you know what? Zac is a pioneer, he's an innovator, he's a disruptor within fashion, and I believe in the two of you, and if we're going to do this, we want to be first. And Alexis and I had one of those pinch me moments like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And so we tried to say with a tough poker face like, oh, I think we could arrange that and let you go first. But obviously we were thrilled, and it really helped open the way for so many other amazing brands.
How did that first Zac Posen sale go?
So it went really well, but we had no idea what to expect. So we opened our first sale ever on Gilt at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we thought it would mimic more of a sample sale in a brick and mortar format. So we thought people would trickle in throughout the day and maybe during their lunch breaks and whatnot. And what we found is that at 9 a.m., which is 6 a.m. on the West Coast, basically the virtual doors flooded open and all our inventory sold out within an hour, which we were not really anticipating. And the sort of funniest part or sad part was that our earliest purchases came from the West Coast. So people had woken up early in the morning, set their alarms to shop online, which then made us reevaluate what time we would do our subsequent sales. And then we kind of, without a lot of analysis and rigor, we ended up making noon Eastern, so 9 a.m. on the West Coast, our time. And people around the country would mark their calendars and log in exactly as our sales would go live.
So you launched Gilt amidst a horrible economy, 2007, 2008. I mean, in a way, that timing turned out to be good, right? Because nobody had any money. Everyone had lost all their money, and everyone was looking for a great buy.
So, of course, we didn't anticipate what was going to happen in the economy. But I do think that, as you say, there were a lot of advantages for us on the side of the brands and the inventory. I think some brands that ordinarily might have been a little bit more strict and sensitive to selling to us, they were open. They needed help. They needed to turn their inventory into cash, and we provided a unique way to do that. And I think the brands loved that our sales would go online for 36 hours. They'd be online, they'd be offline, and it could be almost like it never happened. So my area was getting the best merchandise around the world. So it made my life easier. And then, as you said, from the consumer perspective, people were looking for deals. And even people who really weren't suffering financially, they were being more discreet about their shopping and their purchases. And it just seemed for some people in bad taste to be running around town with big shopping bags. And shopping on Gilt for a lot of people was a smart way to shop.
As Gilt took off, I would imagine that you were crazy busy and that you were sort of running on empty, but you had that kind of fuel and spring in your step that you have when you got something that's winning.
So I'm one of those people who's always busy, even when I'm not busy. I don't really know how to sit still and relax, but I think you are absolutely right. We were crazed. I think the first 3 years, I certainly had no idea what I was getting into. It was my first startup, and I was so passionate about what we were building. I was so emotionally devoted and dedicated. I had just gotten married right before we launched Gilt. And my husband was so supportive of my love for this venture, and he was really there every step of the way. But yeah, it becomes totally addictive, I think, for people, which can be good in the sense that you give it your all, and that comes out in the growth. But it's not necessarily sustainable for long periods of time.
But in the middle of all this craziness, you decide to have your first child. And in fact, I met you, we were talking earlier, when you were pregnant with your first child, your son, right?
Yes.
Who's 8 now. Wow, you had a lot going on. How did you manage that juggle? I mean, do you look back on that and go, whoo?
Yeah, prior to getting pregnant with my son, I was going through a period of so much stress. There was like a 6-month time frame where I had migraines every day, and it was sort of my body was telling me, Alexandra, you have to slow down, and I didn't know how. And I think part of that was because I was so passionate and addicted to the job. And actually being pregnant was really good for me in terms of my stress level. I think I took a moment to say, I have to prioritize my health. And that was so good. And sort of since then, becoming a mother of 1 and then 2, I think I've incorporated it a little bit more. I wouldn't say full on, but a little bit more balance in my life. And, you have a good day at work. That's great. Pat yourself on the back. You have a tough day. You'll get through it and on to the next. And I've tried to, with being a mother and then also with subsequent startups, I've tried to internalize things a little bit less than I did in my first years of Gilt.
Speaking of startups, you went on to form another company. Before we get into Glam Squad, talk about your decision to leave Gilt, your baby, your corporate baby.
So yes, Gilt definitely felt like the first baby. I was there for 7 years, and those were professionally probably the most exciting years I could have possibly imagined. My Gilt co-founder and one of my best friends, Alexis Maybank, she had left a few months before I did. So it was in my mind that it was time for me to think through what my next chapter would be. And the CEO at the time, Michelle Peluso, as well as Kevin Ryan, who was our chairman, they were super supportive of knowing that I wanted to move on to another early stage venture. And I think for me, the question was just, what was the right timing and what was the right choice. And I felt a sense of pressure that because I'd been lucky to be a little bit in, put into the media and in the public eye, I didn't want to make a misstep, and I didn't want my next move to be a failure. It's funny. I feel like when I was launching Gilt and it was my first startup, I really wasn't worried about failure. I was totally comfortable with it. If it didn't work out, what's the worst thing that can happen? I just go back to the world of luxury goods. I felt like leaving Gilt and going into another startup, which was Glamsquad, I in a way felt more pressure than I did the first time.
Mm-hmm. So with Glamsquad, you go in, you put some of your money into that venture. So there was a little bit more risk. You had a couple of different partners. How quickly did that take off?
So Glamsquad launched in 2014, and I initially was an advisor to the company. I'd gone to college with two of the co-founders and was so excited about what they were building. When I was a little girl, or maybe not a little girl, teenager, I always dreamed of, wouldn't it be amazing to have someone come to your home to do your hair? I mean, that to me was like a future dream and sign of success. And the fact that the team at Glamsquad was turning this into a reality, starting small, starting in New York City, starting with blowouts, was so exciting because I saw so much opportunity. And initially, and as an advisor and then investor, I joined the team. I was CEO for over a year. First time I was CEO, so that was a new experience for me. And I loved the experience, from everything from expanding into other services. We went into makeup and nails, expanding to other markets. Today, Glamsquad is in a number of cities in the U.S. And then, of course, fundraising was a big part of what we had to do at Glamsquad. And I tried to have the attitude, which sometimes is scary when you're doing it, but the attitude of, let's bring on the smartest investors we possibly can, who can really guide us in making good business decisions. And we brought on excellent investors who were experienced and who were also women, so they understood the need. And I think that was really, really critical.
So what other advice could you give to women who are looking to raise funds, perhaps on a smaller level than you did? What are some critical skills or tips that they could listen to?
So I really believe in building relationships and your network. I mean, you and I met 8 years ago at a dinner for Gilt, and we're still in touch, even though we haven't seen each other in years. I mean, your network is so, so important, and that can serve you well, whether it's for things like fundraising, if it's for hiring, if it's for partnerships. It's so important to cultivate relationships. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn and keeping in touch with people through LinkedIn. So with respect to fundraising, one bit of advice is try to meet people in advance of when you'd actually need them. So, for example, if you're raising money for a startup and you're trying to raise seed funding, that's great. You need to figure out in the moment who are you going to raise money from, and that could be friends and family. But be thinking about potentially one round, even 2 rounds into the future. So start telling your idea and seeding your idea to later stage investors before you actually need to raise money from those investors. And they can give you great advice on what they would expect to see in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years time. And that can help you figure out what some of the most important milestones are for your business.
Yeah, when you got to raise money and you make the ask, you only have one chance with a particular investor.
Yeah, some investors aren't going to give you a full hour. Some of them are incredibly busy, and your investment might not be in their sweet spot, and that could be investment size, stage, sector. So you really have to get good at delivering your message very quickly and kind of capture them at the hello with the first few slides of your deck. That's super important. I always think it's nice to have a warm introduction too. So if you know someone directly, amazing, leverage your network. But you can also try to leverage people you know who might be able to make introductions for you.
Sometimes we get overcome by a disappointment. We go up to make the big ask, we get shot down for various reasons. What are some mindsets that you use with yourself? I mean, having been so successful, I see there aren't a ton of setbacks, but I did read in one interview that you said there had been ups and downs. What sort of mindsets are your go-to sort of thoughts for that? And have you ever struggled with that?
Well, first of all, I've had tons of no's in my life and doors slammed in my face on all types of levels. If you think back to the days of Gilt, there are many brands that I chased and stalked and begged for inventory, and some of them eventually buckled down and agreed to work with us, but some of them never did. So I think whether it's in sort of your business model or fundraising or hiring people, you can't be afraid of no. You can't be afraid of being shot down. You can't take things personally. And you know, for some people, it's really, really hard. Some people are just naturally very sensitive. And if you're one of those people, you've got to sort of prep yourself to have thicker skin and realize that a lot of times being told no is not personal at all. And people are just sometimes just doing their job, and it has nothing to do with you as the person. And, you know, and that's okay. So I try to be glass half full. So for example, if I reach out in the days of Gilt, if I'd reach out to 10 brands and try to approach them to, let's say, do a deal or get their inventory or a partnership, and if 5 of them wrote me back, I wouldn't take that as 5 rejections. I took that as, that's amazing. We got 5 yeses. This is so exciting. And I think you have to, even if it's 1 out of 10, you try to see the positive and not focus so much on the negative. And I think if people are negative, let's say in the context of fundraising, it's so important to ask for feedback and to ask for advice and say, you know, thank you for your feedback. And I'd love to know, you know, is there something that we could have done differently? Or is there something about our business model that concerns you? Because sometimes you can learn so much more from negativity than you can from people who are just telling you like, yeah, you're great, you're fabulous.
You are an angel investor. So you were saying earlier before we came in here that you enjoy investing in other companies. As an investor, what do you look for?
So I have learned over time that I'm going to add the most value to the types of companies that I inherently understand the best as a consumer. So, you know, I think my sweet spot is really in the intersection of technology and fashion, or technology and beauty, or even wellness, lifestyle, could be mom related types of things. So it doesn't really benefit me to invest in something that I just don't understand, whether it be a sector that's unfamiliar to me, or maybe a technology that's so complicated that, you know, I really don't feel like I can add value. So I think for me, the angel investing is really kind of a hobby. It's super risky. So I think you have to be comfortable with the fact that in early stage investing, sometimes you can lose it all, and you have to be comfortable with that. And sometimes you can do really well. So it's sort of an intellectual way of gambling. I think I'm not a gambler. I don't go to casinos or anything like that, but this is sort of my version of that. It is very, very risky, but if you go for people you believe in who have track records of success, and you go for concepts where you can add value, then that certainly mitigates the risk.
I'm sensing a through line through a lot of your experiences that you do enjoy adrenaline. Would you go so far as to say you're an adrenaline junkie? Or do you see that in yourself?
It's so funny because in some things, I guess I'm a big risk taker. And then in other situations that are maybe more physically risk taking, you know, I get teased by my friends. My husband jokingly calls me safety patrol because, you know, sometimes I'm nervous about things. So I'm not the girl who's going to throw herself out of a helicopter and do heli skiing or bungee jumping or skydiving. You know, that is not me by any means. But you know, but there are other things that I would do. I would take you know, a metaphoric business risk, which is potentially just as scary as throwing yourself off a mountain, off a cliff. But it doesn't feel scary to me. I think we all admire things that are different from what our own comfort zones are.
You know, it's funny with that litany of, you know, jump out of a helicopter, or, you know, ski straight down a black diamond. It's funny because I've had these discussions with my husband as well. And for me, what it is I'm a control freak. Like, I can't control that. You know what I mean? You're just... And yet I feel like in business with risk, there's more control, even though really there isn't sometimes. But I don't like that feeling of just, let go, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny how we all look at risk so differently and through such different lenses. But yeah, it could probably talk about this for hours.
Well, Alexandra, as you know, we talk about bold and innovative pivots that women do. And I think there's been so much boldness and innovation in your career. In terms of the pivot, what I found really interesting was here you are, the quintessential boss lady. You know, that's a big phrase in media right now. And then you leave Glam Squad, you go into another couple startups that you're heavily involved in, but you ultimately wind up at Allergan. And that is a mega global conglomerate, if you will. And even though you're a senior VP, wow, that's a heck of a pivot.
I love to give people the advice that you never know where one conversation or one meeting can lead you, and through a series of totally unexpected conversations and meetings, I have now found myself in a big company as the SVP of Consumer Strategy and Innovation. And while I can see on the outside why that looks so different, and in many ways it is, what I'm actually doing at Allergan is functionally really similar to some of the previous roles I have. So can't talk about it in detail yet until the fall, and I can certainly come back and tell you more then. But I'm effectively working on startups within a big organization. So if I think of the mothership of Allergan as our financial backers and our for me it's almost they're comparisons to having a private equity or venture capital firm funding the ventures that we're working on. It's really been an amazing experience so far for me of working within a company that has deep pockets and resources, but yet being given the freedom to innovate and create startups. So it's really kind of a dream come true of an opportunity.
So in a way, you're still utilizing some of your entrepreneurial skills. You're
Definitely. I think that's why they hired me. And it's new, and there are moments where I'm uncomfortable in the sense that I've never worked in the pharmaceutical sector before. There's a lot of newness for me. There's acronyms I've never heard of before, and I'm there raising my hand every 5 seconds, saying, "What does that mean? What does that stand for?" And that's okay. I think making bold changes at whatever stage in your life where you're thrown into a deep end and there's a lot of unknowns, and someone else might be like, "Oh, I feel stupid because I don't know what XYZ means." And I laugh at myself. And sometimes, I'll be asking what an acronym is, and they'll be like, "That's not a pharma acronym. That's a business acronym." And I'm like,
Oops.
"Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that one anyway." But then on the flip side, when we're working on projects, I'm teaching a lot of people within the company about agile technology and agile learning, and what does MVP stand for, minimal viable product. And so it's really fun to be able to learn and challenge myself, but also to teach.
Yeah, I mean, I know that mentoring young women is something that you've spent time doing, and fostering and nurturing some women as they're coming up the corporate ladder. I would imagine that the women at Allergan are fascinated by you and you being there, and the realm of expertise that you bring. And you're a mother. I mean, we all look to have bosses that are juggling. I remember coming up the ladder, looking for women in the field I was in, like, how did they do it? And I wanted to see sort of role models.
Absolutely. I think we're all always looking for role models, and I have role models for me in my life and my career, and I hope to try to normalize within the company. Although I will say I've met a ton of working moms, more than I probably had seen in the more typical startup entrepreneurial world. But we're all learning from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their little tips and tricks, whether it's beauty secrets or childcare secrets, or how to make quick meals, and what the latest amazing app is for your kids. We all can learn from one another.
We spoke earlier about your mother being Cuban. Was your dad Cuban as well? Is your dad Cuban? Is he still
No,
alive?
my dad isn't.
Okay.
Isn't Cuban.
So your
He's
mother
American.
but your mother was a Cuban immigrant, came here, had to really work her way up, didn't speak the language. Do you think you get some of your work ethic and being able to overcome obstacles from her?
Definitely. A lot of who I am is by virtue of being a product of both my parents. And my mother did come to the U.S. originally from Cuba as a refugee. She was a teacher here in the United States, so was her mother, my grandmother. And I think from them I learned many lessons, but a lot within the world of education. Don't take shortcuts. There's so much value in education. You can lose all your material possessions for reasons that can be beyond your control. In her case, it was sort of the political situation in her country, but she always had her education. And, that's something that's always been really important to me and to my brother and hopefully now to my children. And I think it also instills a sense of hard work, incredible work ethic, and not being complacent. Even when you're up, that's great, but things can tumble down at any moment, sometimes based on circumstances that are 100% out of your control.
Alexandra, what's been the most rewarding thing about your very successful, very varied career? It could be anything. Money has to be great. Please feel free to say that. Has it been, your position, what it's done to your self-confidence, making your parents proud?
Oh, well, I love making my parents proud. I still feel good about myself when they say, "Good job, I'm proud of you, sweetie." But I really would say that I love meeting people, and I think that's a big part of who I am and my personality, and it has always been that way. So when I started Gilt, this number seemed so big at the time. I had 9,000 contacts in my phone, and I was very proud of those contacts, and they really helped fuel the early growth and success of Gilt. Today I have over 20,000 contacts, and do I know everyone in my phone? No, but I rely on my network, and I really believe that we're all as successful as those around us want us to be. And so I try to do kind acts for other people, and at the same time I'm not afraid to ask for help or advice when I need it.
Damn, I thought you were going to say the money. Would somebody just say the money? I'm just kidding.
I'm still working very hard.
Alexandra, we do takeaways at the end of each episode, things that we can take away and learn from your story. What should women listeners take away from what they've heard today?
Well, one thing I always say to my team, and I really believe it and I mean it, is if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think some of us just expect good things to fall in our laps, and life unfortunately doesn't work that way. And you have to be your best advocate. So don't be afraid to ask for things, whether that's negotiating or introductions, invitations even. Don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get.
If you don't ask, you don't get. I think about that a lot, actually. That's great advice. Alexandra, thanks so much for making the effort to come in today. I find your story, your career, and you fascinating.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening today. We'll see you next Tuesday. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe. New episodes of SheSez will automatically be downloaded. And quite frankly, when you're a subscriber, it's a lot easier to listen while you're driving the car or walking the dog. You can tap your podcast app and simply hit play. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, write a review. It takes a minute and will help us stay alive. Just tap where it says See More Episodes. Scroll down to the very bottom, and you'll see where you can fill in the stars. We'd love 5, of course, and write a review. Don't forget to press send. Thanks again, and we'll see you with a new episode next Tuesday.